When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had his chariots made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the hearts of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through the chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other side. So neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from a pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and the chariots and horsemen." And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place, and the Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in Him and in Moses, His servant. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. You may be seated. I read that scripture in its entirety for a purpose. I know it was rarely lengthy. Sometimes we can't pay attention to something that long in our lives, but I think we need to. This morning I'm going to talk to you about what you do when you're in a fix, when your back is against the wall, if you will, or when you're in what we say in the country, when you're in between a rock and a hard place, the devil in the deep blue sea. All those things have been said in our lives probably. But what do we do? Truly, what do we do when we're in a jam? What do we do when we think that there's no way out? And this scripture shows what God can do when we're in a jam. What God can truly do when our backs are against the wall, when we're in a fix and we need help. I was a young pastor and I was really excited about serving the Lord in my very first church. And so I wanted to do something. Have you ever been like that? When you get excited about something, you want to do something. You just don't want to sit there. You don't want to just sit and do nothing. And that's been something that's followed me often in my ministry. I want to get in there and just do something. And boy, you can talk yourself into doing something very quickly. And before you know it, you're doing so much that you're nowhere where the Lord wants you to be for what He desires to bless you with. And this was kind of one of those things. I had so much going on. I was going to seminary. I was trying to go to seminary. We were expecting our second child. We were expecting Kenneth at that time. And we were having it hard financially. We didn't know how we were going to do it. I had left a job that really I was a very good provider for my family. And I didn't really know how I was going to do not being in control of that anymore. And so I was going to seminary on credit cards. I had amassed a lot of debt on credit cards. Any of you ever got in trouble? Don't even raise your hand. No. Oh, mm-mm. But I know sometimes we get into a pickle trying to live beyond our means. And I was convicted by that. And at that point, I really didn't know what else to do. Because, see, I was still trying to control it myself. I was eating my bologna sandwiches and going to seminary and driving up there, and then I'd drive back, and so I wouldn't have to pay for a night's lodging or anything. And we were just getting deeper and deeper into trouble. Not financially trouble as much, but just in all kinds of trouble. We didn't know how we were going to juggle the children. We didn't know how we were going to do things for Pam's job. We didn't know how we were going to get things done for my job. And in the midst of all of that, the Lord led me into a new building campaign for the church. And it wasn't like a building campaign we're talking about right now, a potential something to do in the future. No, this was a building campaign where on a Saturday we went and in faith, we all agreed and we tore down the sanctuary of a little church. Are y'all not stunned? I want to see a little more look there, that was something. And every night I would come home. When I'd come home from seminary, I would go to the church and I would start working. We framed up a new sanctuary. We framed it up. Had 40 men show up on a Saturday, and we framed it up, and we put a roof on it. And you could see right through both walls. There was no walls. And we had to work, and they left me with it. And I was just like, okay, Lord, what now? What am I going to do? And this was really getting to me. You can just imagine. You go home, you're tired, you snap at your wife, you snap at your kids, you're angry and hurt and scared. And this was one night when Kristen had gotten up in my lap and I really needed to do some work on the computer and I really didn't have time to spend with her then. She crawled up in my lap and she wanted to eat pinto beans with me and I just so frustrated. when I got everybody to bed that night, I went out in the front yard. It's the only place I could find any kind of quiet. I went out into the front yard, and I fell down on my knees, and I began to weep. And I was so upset at everything that I could not control. I was in a fix. I was in a bad fix. And I said, Lord, I can't do this. You called the wrong person. You don't understand. I have no vision. I have no future that I'm looking at. I have no idea. I don't even have the talents to do the things that need to be done. And I'm laying out there and at this point, I'm face down into the new grass that I had planted in the front yard. And I didn't know what to do. And so I just prayed. I said, here it is, Lord. I give it to you. I give you all of this. I can't control it. And it's there that the Lord told me, get up and go, and I am with you. I heard that voice as clearly as I've ever heard God's voice. Get up and go, and I am with you. And the thing started, I'm not going to say everything became perfect overnight. But let me tell you, I started seeing the Lord move. I started seeing the Lord move to provide opportunities for me to be able to get some help. I saw opportunities happen so that now other people were right there with me, side by side. I saw where people would begin to bless me. I got a phone call in one afternoon after getting home from seminary, and they said, Brother Mike, we've been thinking about you, and we want you to come over to our church today, and we've got something for you. So I went and had no idea, and it was exactly to the dollar what Pam and I had been praying for, so that we could do what we needed to do for our family. And all that was said of the people that gave that check to us that day was, Brother Mike, we know that it's not easy. And we want to bless you. And the Lord's told us to give this to you, not to go and pay your bills, but to do something that would help you and your family. And I'm telling you, it worked. It took about 10 years, and we paid off all of our credit card debt, and things started, things were better and all. But I learned something that day when I was in a fix, when my back was against the wall. I learned how to humble myself before the Lord and seek Him. Look at the message that we are being shared this morning. And first of all, I want to say that the message, when Moses was there, we see how that the Israelites were confused and they became what? They became afraid, didn't they? How many of us, when we're in the midst of something, when we don't know how to control it, when we don't know how to fix it, when we don't know what to do, we become afraid. And that's the worst thing that can happen to us. It's the worst thing that could happen to them. Because you see, what was needing to be happening, God wanted to show His strength through the Israelites. God wanted to show a miracle. But God needed for everything to come together like He needed it to, so that others would bear witness through their lives. And here they were. They seemed to be wandering. But that was the purpose. That was the purpose, because He wanted to harden Pharaoh's heart. He wanted Pharaoh to come after the Israelites, didn't he? He wanted to end this thing once and for all. He didn't want Pharaoh to come once again and come over into the land and begin to imprison and enslave people again. Instead, God said enough is enough, and He wanted to end it. How many of us are in circumstances right now when you know that this has to end? When you know that this cannot stand any longer? When you know that there's no way that this is going to continue on, that it must stop now? If you know this, then like the children of Israel, God is with you. If you know that this injustice in your life can no longer stand, if you know that this sinfulness in your life can no longer stand, then you need to know that just like the Israelites, that God is with you. And that God has plans not to let this stand in your life any longer. You got to get ready. You got to get ready, people. You got to get ready for something different. You can stay like you are the rest of your life if you want to. But let me tell you something. If you're to the point where you know that this can no longer stand, then God is with you. And if God is with you, then who can be against you? And if you are ready, and you are standing and God is with you, then you need to understand that something powerful is going to happen in your life. Amen. That this will not stand any longer, that God is going to do something to give testimony to His glory. Moses was leading the people the best he could. The best he could. Moses was trying to be faithful to God, and he was. And it was there that God was speaking to this leader. He was speaking daily and moment by moment to this powerful man that God would empower to do great things, to give testimony to a glorious and wonderful God. And so we see that even when it looks like that we don't know what we're doing, even though it looks like that we're wandering and wasting our time, sometimes in the midst of our trials like this, we just have to trust God. We have to trust that God has a greater plan for us. Now look at this story as it continues to unfold. And it was there that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. He hardened his heart, and now he had let them go. And now all of a sudden he sees them, and they've not gone on over toward the Philistines. Instead of going directly to the Philistines like they should have gone, instead, and probably if they had gone on to the Philistines, you know probably what would have happened. They would have been overcome, and they would have been destroyed and killed in battle. They were not ready for battle yet. They were not ready to begin to defend their faith. They were not ready to begin this war that would surely come if they'd entered into the land of the Philistines. So God had them wandering there. And that caused Pharaoh to see them. And his heart was hardened, and he came after them. And he didn't just come after them with a few men and try to drive them away. Instead, he came with all his best. He came with his best chariots. He came with his best unions, his legions of soldiers he came after. The very best. And it was there that he came in full force, at full speed, to annihilate the children of Israel. Children of Israel saw him coming. Now, when you got your back against the wall, there they were. They didn't know where they'd go. They couldn't go towards the Philistines because they knew they'd be persecuted and imprisoned there. They didn't go back in the other direction because they knew then that they would be encamped and imprisoned there. And so what were they to do? They would wait until it came to them. That's hard to do. It's hard for us to wait knowing that something's coming to destroy us. But we got to wait upon the Lord. We have to wait upon Him because He is the one that will take care of us. He is the one that will rescue us. He is the one that will bless us. There they were. There was nowhere to go. They turn around. All they're looking is the sea. Looking in front of them, they were surrounded. Sure death was coming to them. We see that the wind began to blow. How many of you have had God's wind blow in your life? I'm going to tell you something. It's pretty exciting. But I want to go back and say that what happens when we're faced and we've got our back against the wall, the first thing that happens is we begin to become afraid. And fear is the thing that in the gospel later on, Jesus would teach us not to be afraid. Jesus would tell us, do not be afraid, for I am with you always. He went as far to say that I will not leave you orphaned. He said, in a little while, not only will I be with you, not only will I walk with you, not only will God be with you, but also the Holy Spirit would be with you. The Trinity in one, all three would be with you. And we see that, and we see how that it was through Jesus that we see the completion of that. And now He's telling us, when I am with you, do not be afraid. But we do. It's natural for us. When we can't control something on our own, our default system is to become afraid. And when we're afraid, what happens is we begin to make mistakes. We begin to see things wrong. We begin to see things and we see them wrong, and we begin to plan and we miscalculate and we make great mistakes. So Jesus is telling us today, do not be afraid. Know that I am with you. And Moses told the people there to be still. He said, be still. That's the second thing you need to know is do not be afraid, then do not, and be still. There's times in our lives when we just have to be still and wait upon God. We have to be still so that God can speak to our scared hearts. So that God can speak to us when the enemy is at our gates. So that God can speak to us and show us the plan of victory. And then finally we must move. We must go. As the Lord directs us, we must go. Now here's the problem. He's not going to fix it and then tell us to go. Did you see what happened here? They were told to go into the sea. He didn't part the waters when He told them to do that. He didn't make everything a nice little bridge across there and say, come on, it's time to go. He didn't make everything perfect before He required action of you. And so when we've gotten the fear out of our hearts and our minds, and when we've been still and heard from the Lord, then we need to move. And it is at the very moment that they turned, and walked to that water began to be separated for them. Moses raised his staff, and the water began to blow back. The water began to separate, and they were able to walk away from the enemy. And that's what, my friend, is going to happen for you in your life. If you're at that moment when you know that this life, this circumstance in your life can stand no longer, then you know that God is with you. That God is with you, and He will not leave you orphaned. He will not leave you without a plan of victory. And it is at that moment that when you've become still and humbled, that the Lord will speak to you. And it's at that moment that He requires of you faith. Faith. What kind of faith did He say it would take? The size of a mustard seed. It doesn't require much faith, but it requires faith. Faith to make that first step. Faith to do what it is that He's instructing you to do. Faith to just stand with Him and believe and trust that He is your God, that He loves you, that He has a plan to prosper you and not to harm you. It is at that very moment when you're living in that moment of faith that great and glorious things can happen in your life. When your back's against the wall and you know that this can no longer stand, when you're facing death, when you're facing overwhelming obstacles in your life, maybe it's a marriage that's fallen apart. Maybe it's children that have disappointed you or are going in a direction that you just can't live with, you can't stand, and you want for them to walk in the light of Jesus. Whatever the needs are, whatever it is in your life that's troubling you right now, whatever it is, God is ready and willing. God is willing to bring victory into your life. But you cannot be walking in fear. And you can't do it on your own. And you can't get ahead of God. But you have to move with God. Are you ready for that victory in your life? Believe me, it will come. The reason that I know that it will come is the reason it came for the Israelites. Because God will be glorified. And God was glorified by how miraculously the Israelites were saved. God wants them to give testimony to how glorious and wonderful He is. Well, let me tell you something. You can be up against some very horrible odds right now. You can have some very serious circumstances in your life that's about to destroy you, maybe even bring death unto you. Believe me, God wants to use you as a testimony. He wants to show you when all the odds are against you, when everybody says it can't be, when everybody else says it's not possible. It's the God that we serve today that will show you that He can. And that's when you can give that testimony. And that's when you can receive that victory in your life. As we stand and sing our hymn of commitment this morning, I want to ask you, are you ready to receive that victory? Are you ready for the chains of bondage to be broken in your life? Or are you kind of found yourself comfortable where you are? Are you managing it enough to where you can get by? Have you fallen into the trappings of Satan where you think that there's nothing can be any better? That these circumstances can't change? You need to walk away from Satan and you need to turn to God today. Because He wants to give you full victory. He wants to show you how awesome and wonderful a God He is.